How did a small mountain community preserve its identity for centuries? Imagine stepping into a village where even a simple touch is forbidden.
When the temperature drops below minus 50 degrees Celsius, snow and ice test our bodies, but courage keeps us alive.
Not the walls, not the temples, not even the people.
We don't need great wealth to be happy. Love and laughter are enough to fill our hearts.
Hidden high in the mountains of northern India lies a mysterious community, a remote settlement that remained separated from the outside world for generations. Surrounded by steep ridges, dense forests, and difficult terrain, this village developed its own language, its own customs, and its own way of life. The people here believe they are descendants of soldiers who marched with Alexander the Great more than 2,000 years ago. Whether that claim is history or legend remains uncertain. But one thing is undeniable. While roads, technology, and modern life transformed much of the world, this isolated village preserved traditions that continue to shape everyday life even today. This is not just the story of an unusual village. It is the story of how isolation became protection, how culture became a survival strategy, and how a community endured for centuries in a landscape where every journey, every winter, and every generation brought new challenges.
Hard work and patience have kept our people strong for generations.
Today, we travel into Malana, one of the most isolated communities in the Himalayas, to understand not only how its people lived apart from the world, but how they survived there. Because long before Malana became known for its customs and legends, it was the mountains that determined whether life here was possible at all. In this corner of northern India, the peaks are not just scenery, they are the masters of life. They decide where you build your home. They determine what you can grow. And for centuries, they controlled who could enter and who remained outside. Hidden deep within the Parvati Valley, nearly 2,600 meters above sea level, Malana appears as a small cluster of stone and wooden houses, clinging to a steep mountainside. From a distance, it seems insignificant, but for generations, its location made it one of the most difficult settlements in the region to reach. For centuries, there were no roads leading here. Reaching Malana meant crossing dense forests, climbing narrow mountain trails, and navigating rugged terrain that became even more dangerous during bad weather. The mountains did not simply surround the village, they isolated it. While the outside world built kingdoms, fought wars, and expanded trade routes, life in Malana followed a different rhythm. The same mountains that protected the village from outside influence also limited access to resources, trade, and opportunity. Every sack of grain, every building material, and every essential supply had to be carried along steep mountain paths. Even a routine journey demanded time, effort, and endurance. And when winter arrived, that isolation became even more severe. In Malana, survival was never built on convenience. It depended on preparation, cooperation, and a deep understanding of the landscape. When a community remains separated for generations, something remarkable happens. People adapt to their environment. They develop their own traditions, their own systems, and their own way of understanding the world. But geography alone cannot explain Malana. Why did this community remain so different from its neighbors? And how did its unique identity survive for so long? To answer those questions, we have to look deeper into the village's past. In Malana, the past is not something people analyze. It is something they live inside. Here, identity is not written in history books or debated through theories. It exists in daily habits, in spoken words, in how people move through their world, and in the boundaries they carefully maintain. Life here was shaped by separation, geographical, cultural, and psychological. Inside Malana, everything feels self-contained. The language spoken in homes is not widely understood outside the valley. It is passed from parent to child, not as a formal subject, but as a living part of everyday communication. Words are not just tools, they are connections to belonging.
Times were hard, but no one in our village ever walked alone.
The same applies to customs. What may appear unusual to outsiders is normal here. Rules about behavior, space, and interaction are not questioned in daily life. They are simply followed, the way mountain paths are followed without needing explanation. Even social structure carries this sense of continuity. Families remain closely connected, and traditions are passed forward not through instruction, but through observation, by watching how elders live and repeating it in the same environment. In a place like this, isolation does not feel like absence. It feels like normality. But this way of life was never effortless, because living apart from the wider world also means depending entirely on what the valley can provide and what it cannot. And that is where survival begins to define everything, not as a concept, but as a daily reality. Morning in Malana does not arrive gently. It moves slowly over the ridges of Parvati Valley, touching stone roofs one by one, while the peaks of Deotiba and Chandrakani still hold the last of the night's cold. Long before sunlight fully reaches the village, movement has already begun.
I still wake before the first light touches the fields, and I've been doing that for 100 years.
Smoke rises from low wooden houses built into the slope. Inside, life follows routine, shaped not by comfort, but by necessity. Outside, the village is already in motion. Goats move first. They follow narrow, inherited paths carved over generations, routes that climb away from homes and disappear into slopes where cultivation is impossible. These animals are not separate from survival here. They extend it beyond the limits of land, because land itself is limited. The fields below are small and fragmented, cut into terraces pressed into steep mountainsides. Barley and potatoes grow here, not because they are ideal crops, but because they are what the land allows. The growing season is short and entirely dependent on weather that no one can control. A shift in temperature is enough to affect an entire harvest. Higher slopes carry sheep through slower movement. Their role is not only economic, but seasonal. Wool becomes insulation during long winters when the valley is cut off from easy movement. What is stored in these months determines what survival feels like later. Nothing in Malana is left unprepared. Everything is calculated through repetition and memory. Above the grazing routes, forest begins to take over the landscape. Deodar trees and mixed Himalayan vegetation cover steep slopes where no farming is possible. This forest is not distant wilderness. It is part of survival itself. Firewood is collected here and carried down in heavy bundles through narrow trails. These paths are not marked on maps in a formal sense, but they exist through continuous use. Generations have kept them alive simply by walking them. Water flows differently. Snowmelt from higher ridges moves through natural channels, shifting with season and temperature. In summer, it strengthens and spreads through the village. In colder months, it slows and becomes unpredictable.
The mountains are generous in summer, but careful in winter.
Families adapt without discussion. This rhythm has always existed. At the center of the village stands the Jamlu Devta temple, built in dark, carved wood and stone. Unlike surrounding temples in the region, its structure feels heavier, rooted deeper into the landscape. It is not just a place of worship, it is tied to decision-making, dispute resolution, and internal order. Governance here does not exist outside belief. It moves through it. Often described as a traditional, clan-based council system, village decisions are made internally, shaped by long-standing customs connected to Jamlu Devta. Authority does not come from outside enforcement. It comes from collective acceptance within the system itself. This is why Malana is often referred to as having one of the oldest surviving self-governing structures in the region, not in modern institutional form, but in continuity of internal decision-making. But the most visible boundary of the village is not governance. It is separation. For generations, physical contact rules have defined interaction with outsiders. Houses, objects, and people are kept at distance from those who enter from outside the valley. This is not symbolic. It is practiced as structure.
It creates a clear division between internal life and external presence. And within that internal life, survival is not divided into categories. It is one system. Animals, land, water, language, and belief are all part of the same cycle. Nothing functions alone. Everything supports something else. Kanashi is spoken inside homes, carrying daily communication, memory, and instruction. It is not preserved as heritage, it is used as life. Outside this valley, it exists almost nowhere in active form, but inside Malana, it continues naturally through generations. Alongside it, a belief persists that the people of Malana trace lineage to Alexander the Great's army. Whether history or oral tradition, it continues to shape how separation and identity are understood within the village. As the day continues, nothing becomes easier. The mountains remain unchanged. The conditions remain constant. Only life adjusts quietly, continuously, as it always has. The closer you move toward Malana, the more the village begins to define space before you enter it. It is not spoken, it is felt. Movement slows. Distance becomes natural. Interaction becomes controlled without instruction. The paths leading from Parvati Valley, whether through Kasol, Rashol, or the narrow mountain approaches, do not simply bring you into a settlement. They bring you into a system that already exists. At the center of that system is Jamlu Devta. The temple stands in carved wood and stone, darker and more grounded than most structures in the surrounding region. It is not only a place of worship, it is where decisions begin and return. Matters of land, disputes, and internal order are tied to it through tradition. Authority here does not sit outside the village, it exists within belief. Alongside this, governance operates through long-standing local structure, often described as a clan-based council system. Decisions are not imposed from outside. They are formed internally through agreement shaped over generations. Nothing here functions separately. Belief, order, and daily life move as one structure. Kanashi is spoken inside homes without translation. It is not preserved as cultural identity, it is daily communication. It carries instructions, memory, and meaning in its natural form. Outside the valley, it is rarely understood. But inside Malana, it remains the language of life itself. The no-touch rule further defines this structure.
Don't touch, no video, why?
Visitors are expected to maintain physical distance from villages, homes, and sacred spaces. It is not presented as hospitality or restriction. It is a boundary system that separates internal existence from external presence. Even presence itself is regulated by space. Within the village, daily survival continues through farming, livestock, and forest-based resources. Goats and sheep move through steep terrain that does not allow large-scale agriculture. Their role is not secondary. They are part of survival in a landscape where land alone is not enough. Everything functions through interdependence. Animals, terrain, water, and human effort form one system. Whether historical truth or oral tradition, it remains part of how identity and separation are understood within the community. But none of these systems exist in complete isolation anymore. Movement through Parvati Valley has increased over time. External contact is no longer rare. Exposure arrives gradually, not as disruption, but as continuity. Inside the village, this is not experienced as sudden change. It is experienced as adjustment. Younger generations carry awareness of life beyond the valley. Older generations continue to maintain the system that has always defined survival inside it. Both exist together, but not in the same direction. Malana is still governed by its own rhythm, still shaped by Jamlu Devta's traditional order, still carried by Kanashi and long-standing boundaries. But now, for the first time in its long continuity, those systems exist alongside a world that is no longer distant. And that is where the next shift begins. Not in collapse, not in loss, but in tension between what has always worked and what is now arriving. There is a moment in Malana when the village feels still, but not unchanged. The mountains remain where they have always been. Parvati Valley continues far below. Deotiba and Chandrakani still hold the horizon as they always have. Inside the village, life continues in its familiar rhythm. Goats move along narrow paths, sheep climb steep slopes, smoke rises from stone homes built into the hillside, and at the center, the Jamlu Devta temple continues to hold the structure of belief and decision. Kanashi is still spoken, not preserved, but lived. It carries daily life in the same way it always has. But the village is no longer only shaped by itself. Movement through Parvati Valley is more frequent now. Connection is no longer rare. The outside world does not arrive as a single force. It arrives in fragments, slowly, repeatedly, quietly changing the edges of daily life. Nothing breaks suddenly, but balance changes. Inside homes, different directions now exist together. Some remain rooted in tradition. Others look toward possibilities beyond the valley. Both exist in the same space. Malana's survival system still works. The land still demands effort. Winters still test endurance. Nothing about the physical reality has changed. But survival is no longer only about nature. It is about time, because time has started moving differently around the village. What was once distant is now close. What was once separate is now connected. And what was once closed is now partially open. Still, Malana does not dissolve into that change. It holds its structure in language, in belief, in boundary, in daily rhythm. And maybe that is what defines it now more than isolation ever did. Not a village untouched by the world, but a village learning how to remain itself inside it. As the view pulls away from the valley, the stone houses become smaller against the Himalayas. The sound fades. The paths disappear into the slope, and what remains is not an ending, but a question still unfolding. Malana does not answer. It continues,